need to write. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I know it's cold and we're just getting back after the holidays, and so I appreciate you all coming out this evening. And I'm going to talk about my face for a second, because do you notice anything different if I try to smile? This side of my face doesn't work right now. So let me tell you, Satan has been trying really hard, not just the last week, but especially the last week, to make sure I don't get to present this stuff to you guys. So it must be really important for us to hear, because he's trying very hard to knock my legs out from under me. So exactly a week ago today, I got up to take a shower. Nobody else was up, and I'm not real cognizant in the morning. I just kind of get up and I go to the shower, get in, did what I needed to do, got out. My lips have been chapped because it's winter time, so I got my chapstick out and started putting it on my lips. And you do this with your lips. You go, to make it go where it's supposed to. And I was standing there going, that doesn't feel right. So I looked in the mirror and did it, and then I realized, oh my gosh, the left side of my face isn't working. And fortunately, I'd seen this before, so I wasn't thinking, oh no, I'm having a stroke, which is what another symptom that could have been. So I kind of first checked my hands. Okay, both hands are working, both legs are working. Okay, I'm good. And I had heard of Bell's palsy before, which is what this is. And I was looking in there going, I'm speaking at a conference in a week. Are you kidding me? Because it was so much worse a week ago. I mean, this is better than it had been. But anyway, so my husband was still in bed. He was kind of sitting up, but he was even groggier than I am in the morning. And so I come out, get dressed, come out and say, I think I need to go to the doctor. And I never say that, okay? So he sits up and then he sees me and he goes, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And so I kind of told him what I thought it was. And he said, you still need to call the doctor and just, get checked out. And I said, okay. So I called the doctor and talked to the receptionist, because you don't get to talk to the doctor, obviously. And she said, no, you need to go to the ER because you could be having a stroke. And I'm like, and then she says, are you having any other symptoms? And I said, well, up to this point, no. But now that you said the word stroke, I'm kind of lightheaded and I'm feeling like I'm nauseous. And I said, but okay, we'll go to the ER. And I was like, oh, man. So, and on top of that, that was the morning that we had an appointment to take the van in to the shop because the defroster's not working. Can you imagine not having a defroster right now? So I said, okay, Tom, that's my husband. I said, let's get dressed. We'll go drop the van off on the way to the ER. And so, looking back, it's kind of like maybe we should have done that in the reverse order. But at the time, it made really good sense. So we did. And we got there, and sure enough, they said, oh, yeah, this is totally Bell's palsy. And everything worked out great. Okay, so yay, face not working. Okay, I'll figure it out. How am I going to deal with this and speak? Because at that time I couldn't say B's or P's. It was like P. B. And of course my 17-year-old daughter said, say porcupine. say Peter Piper Victor. That's still hard, you see. And she goes, but it was kind of interesting. And then, so what do they do? Okay, let me give you a little biology here because I like that stuff and I won't get too deep. But anyway, so what causes Bell's palsy is there's this nerve that comes out of your brain stem right here. And then it branches out to all the muscles in your face. Well, this little tube it's in before it branches out, somehow that all gets inflamed, and so that that nerve gets pinched, and you just go slack. And so that's what had happened. And I just lost my train of thought, and I'll get to that in just a minute too. But so they don't know exactly what causes it, but they think it's a virus, perhaps. So what they did was put me on some antivirals, yay, just in case, and prednisone. And I'd never been on prednisone before. And I'm menopausal. And so you take a menopausal woman, emotions are already kind of wonky, and let's put a whole bunch of prednisone on top of that all of a sudden. And so Satan worked really hard this week to try to make sure that I wasn't going to be in a frame of mind to share this stuff and get my thoughts together. Because my thoughts have been fuzzy. I've had all sorts of weird stuff come up that just said, ha, you're not going to be able to focus. But you know what? Satan didn't win because we're here, right? Yeah. We're here, and I'm going to share this stuff, and it's good, and it's important, and it'll help us be better Christians. So I can be pretty entertaining, especially if I get thirsty and try to drink, because it might just kind of dribble down. If you see me eating, I'll have a napkin over my face because I still have to push food to the other side. So just, kind of entertaining. We'll just look at it that way. Okay, so I thought, ha, God, you have such a sense of humor, because what am I talking about? Assertiveness, self-esteem, and I have to get up here with my face looking like this. Yeah, so it's a little distracting. But how many of you watched American Idol back in the days when Paula and Randy and Simon were the people on there, back in the beginning? Okay. Well, I don't know if they planned it this way, the creators, but those 3 judges represent each of the 3 behavior types that we're talking about this weekend: passive, aggressive, and assertive. So I'm going to look at that for just a second, because that's kind of a good illustration. And first we'll look at Paula. And yeah, it is hard to say P's still, Paula. So we're going to look at Paula Abdul. And she, in the beginning especially, was a very passive personality type. She had comments that were really nice and kind, and she was soft-spoken, and she didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And sometimes that meant that although she was loving, she didn't especially tell the truth. Okay, and those 2 words are going to come up a lot this weekend: truth and love. Her words were loving, but not always truthful. Now, as time went on, she got better at this, and she was finally able to give more honest comments, even if it was a little bit biting to the person, but not rude, just a little bit more out there. So, now we'll look at the aggressive personality. I wonder who that might be. Simon. Simon was truthful. You got to admit, he was truthful, but he was also so cocky and so direct and so biting that all the contestants could do was try to survive his feedback. You know, it wasn't especially constructive, because they were thinking, am I going to survive this? In my opinion, he went beyond aggressiveness and became cruel, and sometimes intentionally cruel, which we can do sometimes too. So Simon showed us how to be truthful, but not loving. So far we still don't have anybody that's gotten both down. And that's kind of like performing surgery without anesthesia. It's like, here, hold still, this is good for you. You know, it's like, ugh. And you don't hear what they say. Now, over the years also, Simon has toned it back a little bit so that he can at least communicate, but he's still really aggressive. All right, let's move on to the big dog, Randy Jackson. My Texas accent just came out. I'm sorry. Anyway, Randy Jackson, he's the 3rd and final and most important personality behavior type, is assertive, which he showed pretty well. He was good at being truthful and loving, or caring, however you want to say it, at the same time. And there were times when the singers weren't that good, and he needed to give feedback that was constructive, but they probably didn't want to hear that. But Randy was able to be kind, respectful, truthful, and get his point across without humiliating them. And if you'll notice too, Randy didn't really change over the years, because he didn't need to. He didn't need to rein in his aggressiveness or step up on his passive behavior. He kind of had it. Even though he's quirky, he still was loving and truthful. So there you've got it: passive, aggressive, assertive. Now we're going to look at each one of those in a little bit more detail. Let's start with aggressive. And as you guys know, people get that confused with assertive a lot. But let's talk about aggressive. That is a behavior that moves against others. The definition out of Merriam-Webster is having or showing a bold forcefulness in the pursuit of a goal. Pretty straightforward. Synonyms are words like ambitious, go-getting, high pressure, in your face, militant, pushy, not so great. Now, it's an attitude as well as a behavior, and it assumes the right to patronize someone else, to put them down, to dominate them, and sometimes to humiliate them. An aggressive person just thinks too much of themselves and their own opinion. Even when trusted friends will try to give them advice and say, you know, you need to pull it back, they don't change, they don't hear you. We're going to go to the Bible a lot. It has all the wisdom for us, and here, out of Proverbs 26:11, it talks about that. It says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. An aggressive person doesn't usually change. And aggression may be expressed in different ways. It can be physical. If you're physically aggressive, you might push somebody, get in their face, block them from leaving a room. Those are all aggressive physical behaviors. Nonverbal expressions, if you're sneering, got your arms crossed, rolling your eyes, those are nonverbal aggressive behaviors. The most common type of aggressive behavior is verbal, where it goes from, you can have a tone and a dynamic that's Aggressive, you can be condescending with your tone. You can be too loud. You can have insults, put-downs, profanity. You blame the other person for your own mistakes and failures. And sarcasm is a very aggressive tool that we use sometimes. The Greek root of the word sarcasm means flesh tearing. And sarcasm tears emotional flesh. It is very aggressive. An aggressive person may speak up too much. So in a crowd, they may not give anybody else the opportunity to get a word in edgewise. And do you guys remember back in elementary school, the kid who every time the teacher asked a question, they were like, I know, call me, I know. And the teacher would finally say, does anybody other than Sally know the answer? Well, I was that kid, by the way, but that can be an aggressive behavior, not giving anybody else a chance. And another aggressive behavior is, let's say the less assertive person does speak up, and immediately an aggressive person will knock down what they said, have some criticism or some reason to say, that's ridiculous. So there's another way to be aggressive called passive aggressive, and we women are good at that, aren't we? We're good at being passive aggressive. But it's not a good thing to do. It's a subtle, sneaky way to still get your way, to still get under somebody's skin and move against them. But on the surface, you're pretending to be all nice. It's just kind of around the back door where you're doing the aggressive part. Some passive-aggressive behaviors are like procrastinating. Let's say I don't want to do what I agreed with my husband I'll do. Well, I'll just not get around to it. Or I'll forget. Or I'll dawdle. Pouting when we don't get our way. We don't do that. Silent treatment. That is so cruel. I grew up in a house where silent treatment was done a lot. Sometimes you didn't even know why, and you're made to feel very, very unworthy of anything. So silent treatment is a passive-aggressive behavior. And then manipulative tears. And I'll be the first to say that tears are not bad at all. I'm a crier. Whether I'm happy or sad, if there's an emotion attached, I'm crying. But if you use them to manipulate, that's not a good thing. It's not an honest thing. So that was aggressive. Let's move to passive. Passive means not resisting, not acting, not standing up for yourself. And Merriam-Webster, our old friend, says passive means receiving or enduring without offering resistance. Pretty simple. Some synonyms for passive are acquiescent, non-resistant, resigned, tolerant, yielding. Passive people are generally motivated by a fear of something, a fear of being embarrassed, a fear of somebody being mad at them. Usually behind passive behavior is fear. You can be physically passive by withdrawing from a situation, leaving the room, not going to a meeting if you think it's going to be too confrontational. Another way to be physically passive, and this is an extreme, is if someone's abusing you and you don't do anything about it. That's a passive behavior as well. Being verbally passive means you just keep quiet and withdraw. When you're passive, you don't give feedback. Or if you do provide feedback, it's to say, yeah, I like that idea. Just what you said. It's not your own. You're just putting it on them. And some of the characteristics of a passive voice is soft-spoken, or you're looking down. Nobody can really hear you, understand you, but you're pretending like you're speaking up. So passive is quiet and withdrawn. Maybe your statements end with an inflection as if you were asking a question. So let's say they said, what would you like to do for dinner tonight? And you're being brave, you're going to give an answer. So you say, oh, I don't know, maybe Red Robin. It's like a question. It's not like Red Robin. How about that? Passive body language includes things like not making eye contact or hanging your head as you talk, that slumped body position that just says, I'm not valuable enough to share with you. Having your arms crossed, your head down, pulling in on yourself, looking bored or uninterested, and again speaking softly and mumbling. Passive behavior sends a message to the other person that you don't believe that what you have to say has any value. And by extension, they get that same message. You don't think they're going to think you have anything of value to add. It's an unspoken message that you're giving these people. Oftentimes, passive folks will immediately fall into a submissive role anytime they're in a group. They might sit in a meeting and never say anything, even though they've got some great ideas. And if you speak with them one-on-one or read something they've written, you think, whoa, I had no idea that was going on in their head, because they really have some good stuff, but they can't get it out. If you ask them what they want, they'll just say, I don't know, whatever you want. And like I said, they're generally ruled by fear. And fear is a huge, huge problem for us. One thing we don't think about too often is passive verbal behavior often involves outright lying. And we don't think about that too much, but it does. If something is wrong and somebody says, are you okay? Is something wrong? And you say, no, I'm fine. That's not the truth, okay? Or if you do have an idea that you think would work so well for a retreat or a ladies' seminar, and the committee's saying, okay, who has some ideas about skits? And you're like, oh man, I've got a bazillion. And you go, no. That's not even truthful, okay? So we're going to get to that too. Being passive is not the same thing as submissive. Submission is actually an assertive action. You have to have strength to be submissive, and you choose to be submissive. And we're going to hit that one in the morning pretty good. Being passive is not the same thing as being meek. And we'll talk about that tomorrow too when we get into more of the biblical Christian perspective. But Jesus showed us how to be both meek and assertive. And we're going to look at that. Passive people seem to be constantly on the lookout for disapproval or disappointment from other people. And they don't provide their honest communication in a relationship, so it's hard to have a deep, fulfilling, satisfying relationship if you're passive, because you're afraid to go deep with the people in your life. And another thing that I've been passive in my past, and so I'm very familiar with these types of things. And one thing that unfortunately I fell into as well, and people do, is we often will speak up later. Like if we have a complaint or something that's bothering us about a sister or brother in the church, we won't tell them, but we'll go tell somebody else. We'll complain about that to them, but we're too afraid to approach them. And that's not an okay behavior either. So passive isn't just, oh, they're laid back, they don't have much to say. There's some real issues there as well. But let's move on to assertive, because that's why we're here this weekend, to focus on how we can do that. Here's a very good definition of assertiveness, and I don't even know where I got it. I just have it, and it's really good, so I'm going to read that to you. And I forgot to mention, too, and you probably figured this out, the orange handout is tonight's outline, so if you haven't gotten it out, well, we're way into this by now, there's the orange one. So a lot of these definitions are in there for you. So here's the definition of assertiveness. It's the ability to express yourself openly and honestly, while also reflecting a genuine concern for others. It's about having the confidence to be yourself, to be true to your values and beliefs, and to be courageous enough to speak up when needed. That's pretty complete. Now here's a verse out of Ephesians 4, verses 14 through 16, and I love this. We're going to use this verse a lot in my talks. And I'm going to read this whole passage, but I'll focus on one little piece too. So starting in verse 14 of Ephesians 4, it says, "Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves, and blown here and there by every wind of teaching, and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming." Now listen to this verse. "Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. From him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work." Speaking the truth in love is assertiveness. That's what it is. And we're really going to get into that. Assertiveness is standing up for your right to be treated fairly. It's expressing your opinions, your needs, and your feelings, and at the same time respecting the needs, opinions, and feelings of others. That is speaking the truth in love. So let's talk about a few characteristics of assertive Christians. First of all, they believe they have options. God gave us all free will, and we are to exercise that free will and examine opportunities and options so we can make God-pleasing choices. We don't want to be limited by our fears. Assertive Christians are proactive. They enter into situations and offer their ideas and use their gifts and their opinions without waiting for somebody to invite them in. They're proactive. Assertive Christians believe God values each and every person, not just some people, and that includes them. God values them as well. Assertive Christians are motivated by agape love, and I'll give you a definition of that. It's an unconditional love that seeks the best for the other person with no strings attached. This is that selfless love that doesn't change even if the love is not returned. Loving your enemies is agape love. Being assertive is being able to love your enemies. Assertive Christians stand up for themselves without excessive anxiety. You're always going to have some anxiety when you're in a confrontation. You can't get rid of that. But without excessive anxiety. They accept their own limitations and the limitations of others. They don't expect anybody to be perfect. Assertive Christians can choose to behave assertively, aggressively, or passively. And that may seem like a strange statement to make after I just talked about those other two things. But as you'll see tomorrow, Jesus used each of the three types of behavior depending on the situation in order to accomplish his goal of salvation for the entire world. There are times when aggressiveness and passiveness are appropriate, but you have to be assertive in order to use them properly. We'll get into that tomorrow. So it sounds like assertiveness is really a good way to go, but a lot of us struggle with that. So why aren't we more assertive? What gets in our way? Well, a lot of times, like we said earlier, we might confuse aggression with assertiveness. And we don't want to be aggressive, so we just don't know what to do. Sometimes we believe we aren't supposed to focus on ourselves at all because of verses like Philippians 2, verse 3. Let's listen to that. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. We will hit that one really hard tomorrow, too, and understand that better. We aren't more assertive, as I've said before, because of fear. We're fear of being embarrassed, of the anger or disapproval of other people. We're afraid of saying the wrong thing, of displeasing God, or of having people call you the you-know-what word that starts with a B because they think we're being aggressive and we're being assertive, and they call us the you-know-what word that starts with a B. We don't like that. We're also not more assertive because sometimes we believe that if we're just quiet, we won't have to confront. If we just wait, it'll go away. That doesn't work. And sometimes we believe that other people will like us more if we just go along to get along. We just want to get along, so I'm not going to bring it up. If you've had an abusive childhood, it can make it very difficult to be assertive. You tend to go one extreme or the other. And then there's just a lack of self-confidence in general that can get in your way. And then kind of another issue that we're not going to talk a lot about, but some people have an attitude of, I just really don't care. I'm not going to speak up because I don't care. Whatever, do whatever, I don't care. That's a whole other seminar topic, but that can be a problem too. So basically, we aren't assertive because we're afraid of something. Something's getting in the way. And to speak the truth in love is to be assertive. Remember, true love casts out fear. All of this works together. The Bible as a whole deals with all of these topics, and hopefully we're going to bring some of that together tomorrow. If you want to become more assertive, you have to change both your thoughts and your actions. You can't just change one or the other. So let's take a couple of minutes and talk about how our feelings and our thoughts are related. Okay, real simply, the brain stores both feelings and thoughts, and it can summon up those feelings when prodded, given the right association. Something happens, you feel something. Okay? Well, that summoning of memories is quicker than the snap of my fingers if I could snap them. There, got it. Okay, it's quick. It happens, you don't even know it's happening. And you usually don't even know a process is occurring. It's just like, oh gosh, that car's about to hit me, oh my, I'm afraid. Okay, you didn't think, oh gosh, I thought something and my nerves did this, and there it was. So, and the thing to remember is your thoughts come first and then your feelings. And sometimes we think it's the other way around, but it's not. And we kind of don't like that fact, because if our thoughts come first and then our feelings come, that means we can change our feelings. And nobody can make you feel a certain way. And you've probably heard that, but it's true. People can do things that will trigger a reaction or response in you that leads you to feel a certain way. But your feelings are based on your past. They're based on your experiences and a lot of other things, okay? So, do you guys talk to yourselves? Yeah, do you do it out loud? Do you do it out loud? I try not to do it out loud because I have, gosh, I'm glad my sister's not here. I have a sister who has a running conversation with herself out loud all the time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, people think she's crazy. I don't want to be like that. But anyway, she's really nice. She just has this habit. But we all talk to ourselves. We have this running commentary, and about what's going on, about ourselves, about everybody else, about the situation that we're in. What you say to yourself during that self-talk strongly influences how you feel, okay? And that is a truth as well. But what you think to yourself about other people, yourself, and the events that are going on strongly influences how you feel about those things. That's not some sort of psychological mumbo-jumbo. It's not only correct, it's biblical, which we will see. Look at Proverbs 23, verse 7. For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. In Philippians 4, verse 8, I love this. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Now, why do you think he said that? Why do you think he said to think about noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable things? Well, maybe God just told him to, but I think Paul also knew that the power of our internal voice plays a big role in how we feel, and because actions begin with thoughts. The way you speak to yourself in your head or out loud, if you're my sister, about yourself and others and the world around you, even about God, it matters. And it makes a difference. And you can change a very negative mindset into a very positive, assertive, uplifting one. It's a fact that you can modify your own emotions by what you choose to think. About 20 years ago, let's say, I was a really negative, sarcastic, depressed, glass half empty sort of person. And I could hardly even remember who that person was because I'm not that now. So how did that change? Well, I know God did that. But it took a lot of effort on my part. It took a lot of unlearning habits of self-talk about how everybody else was making my life so miserable and blah, blah, blah. It took effort and time, but I changed the way I thought. I found the good in what was going on. This week, oh my goodness, 20 years ago, I wouldn't be here tonight. I would have said, I can't talk, my face is paralyzed. But no, it's like, oh well, whatever. But over time and with God's help, you can change that so that your stress level goes down so much. Your stress and your anxiety when you don't automatically find the fault in everything that's going on. So you can change your feelings with your thoughts. That was kind of the point. Individuals are response-able. Responsible is response-able. We are able to choose our response. And an assertive Christian will make proper choices. We all get to choose. You know, I didn't have a battery for my recorder tonight. I could have said, now I'm not going to get to take a recording back, and people were counting on me, and blah, blah, blah. But instead I said, oh, well, let's go get a battery. It made a huge difference. I didn't have to be stressed. Now, maybe the person going to get the battery was stressed for me. I don't know. But you see my point. It's like, I'm having a great evening because I didn't worry about it. I didn't need to. It was all going to work out to God's glory. So, being assertive, I want to make this point too. It doesn't mean you're not going to have to deal with difficult people. It's not like, oh, okay, I'm going to be assertive and everybody will just kind of get along with me really good. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. There are always going to be some people who are hard to get along with for any number of reasons. There's going to be people who are never satisfied no matter what you do. But if you tie your emotional well-being to how they respond to you, you're going to be miserable. And I know a lot of people who do that. It's like, oh, so-and-so did such and such, and I'm so depressed, and I can't even relax. And I'm thinking, that is not even about you. You know, we can't tie our emotional well-being into other people's decisions and responses. Let's talk about emotions for a moment. They can confuse us, can't they? They're so strong that sometimes they cause us to become confused about what's really going on. Our emotions can make us blind to the truth. And I'm sure each of you can think of a time in your life when your emotions were so intense that you couldn't really tell what truth was, especially in romantic situations. You thought this was the greatest person in the world, but your emotions got in the way. Stuff fell apart. You look back on it and says, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? Your emotions cloud truth sometimes. And let's not discount what a big role sin plays in our inability to see truth too. If sin is in the way, our vision is cloudy as well. So this is kind of a distorted truth that comes out of this stuff. And here's some statements that probably you guys have thought to yourself before, but it's not truth. Listen to these. If someone is angry with me, it must be my fault. If nobody invites me out to lunch after church, they must not like me. If people don't tell me I'm a good person, I guess I'm not a good person. Here's one that we as women struggle with. It's my job to keep the peace, to make everybody happy, to meet everybody's needs. Here's another one. Everybody should be nice to me. I should never be angry, and I really don't even have a right to stand up for myself. We can really believe that stuff, and that affects everything about us when we go there. But assertive thinking celebrates what God has done and continues to do. When you think truthfully about what's going on in your life, about the people in your life, you'll most likely, like we said, be less anxious and less stressed. We make assumptions, don't we? And those get us into trouble too. Our assumptions create a lot of needless worry and anxiety, and we're usually thinking about things that never happen or dwelling on things that we can't change. I'll give you an example. Over Christmas, my daughter from Oklahoma Christian was home, and her boyfriend is in Kansas. That's where he's from. So they're 21. They text all the time and Skype. And one evening she was upset, and so I was trying to figure out what was going on. And she said, well, he hasn't texted back in about 3 hours. I said, oh boy. No, I didn't. I said I put on my counselor hat and my mommy hat, and I was like, oh, really? Well, is that unusual for him? She said, no, he's usually really good about responding right back, and unless he leaves his phone if he goes to dinner and he just forgets it or the battery dies. And I said, oh, okay. And so I said, well, is it typical of him to do this? And she said, no, not really. And so I said, well, has there been anything going on lately where he's been kind of trying to avoid you? And she said, no, everything was fine 3 hours ago. But you can see Satan was working. Satan was working. These two are as close to being engaged as you can be without being engaged. So it's not like he was just some guy she'd been out with a couple of times. He's a good guy. And they're close. But Satan was playing on her mind, and her little assumption brain was saying, I know what this means. This means that he's found another girl, and he's going to break up with me. That's what she was feeling. And that was based on an experience she'd had with somebody else a couple of years ago. But that's where her mind went. He hasn't texted back. It must be this. Okay? Well, so even though both of us could talk through the situation, and she could say, okay, there's nothing telling me he's trying to get rid of me here. That's what she felt. So as it turns out, his phone had died, and she didn't find that out until 6 hours later. She was kind of upset, so she said, I'm not texting him back now. And I thought, oh, come on, don't do that. But anyway, so it was resolved. So the facts were, they'd been texting, he didn't respond for 3 hours, that was unlike him. Last time they talked, everything was good. Okay, those were the facts. But then her little feelings strayed beyond that, like we do. And she said, but what if the worst? And Satan was going, yeah, what if? I'm just going to make you miserable. And it did for a while. So we've got to work on not doing that. Do your best not to make assumptions about anything. And I mean that. That's advice I give in counseling all the time. Don't make assumptions. Clarify. It'll cut down so much on your stress. I've already said that. I have kind of fuzzy brain too, so if I go, oh, I said that, I'm not going to say that again. Just smile. All right, let's talk about worry for a minute, because that's what my daughter was doing. That's what we all do. But again, the Bible talks to us about worry, doesn't it? In Matthew 6, verse 34, it says, Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Amen. It does have enough trouble. And then Matthew 10, verses 20. Do not worry about what to say, that's me, or how to say it. At the time you'll be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. I cannot tell you how many times in counseling sessions I have people come in and they're telling me something and my heart is just going out to them, but I'm kind of like, I don't know how to help this person. It goes beyond my training or whatever. And each time I say a silent prayer and I say, God, you know what they need. Give me the courage and the words to help them, to give them what they need, because I don't know. And you know what? Every time he does. So this verse about don't worry about what you're going to say. It's not you, it's God. You know, Moses figured that out, didn't he? He said, I can't speak. God said, yeah, okay, you'll be fine. But so we can be confident and we can choose assertive behavior because God is with us. His Spirit is in us. And this is an interesting point when you think about it. Who other than Christians can be assertive and have self-confidence? I mean, if you're not a Christian, where's that coming from? That's just you, and that's not much. So Christians have every reason to feel that confidence and to be assertive. All right, I need to keep moving on here. Assertiveness is about behavior choices. You don't just change your thinking to be assertive, you have to change what you do. And so let's talk about that for a moment too. Will I do this thing or won't I do this thing? Will I say this thing or won't I say this thing? Assertive behavior means speaking respectfully about yourself and others. Like we said earlier, you can choose how you speak to yourself. You can screw something up and say, oh, I'm really a moron. Or you can say, gosh, I messed up that time, but next time I'm going to try and do better. That's a difference. And how you speak about others. You can say, I can't believe she's so stupid. That's the S word in our house, so don't tell my kids that I said that. But. Or you can say, she seems to make some poor choices when her depression kicks in. Subtle difference, but huge impact. A lot of times we confuse people with their behaviors. Somebody who commits a thoughtless act is not necessarily a thoughtless person. A healthier and better and more assertive choice is to focus on the behavior rather than the person and look for the truth in the matter. Don't spend your time assigning fault or looking for motives or competence. And one area where this is really obvious is when somebody has wronged you and they apologize, but you don't accept their apology. Have you ever done that or had somebody do that to you? And the reason given is, I don't believe they mean it. As a counselor, that frustrates me so much. I'll have couples come in, and one person's been doing this behavior forever, and the other one has wanted it changed, and now it's like, ooh, light bulb. And so they'll say, I really get it, I'm going to change it. And the other person says, it took him 10 years. I don't think it counts, because I don't think he means it. And I'm like, what? You know, who are you to judge the motive of that person? God is the only one who knows what's in his heart, or her heart. I mean, we're all women, so I'm saying he, but, you know, how do you know? We are too often motive cops, or we'll say, oh, so-and-so's only doing that so she can, like, you know, get all the attention. I don't know that. And what kind of disharmony does that make when we make those kinds of assumptions? Anyway, thank God that God does not treat us that way, because I don't want him to say, you know what, you've been working on losing weight for like 20 years, and why do you think you mean it this time? I don't think you mean it. No, he doesn't do that, thank goodness. And I want to give the same consideration that I expect. So Romans 5:8 drives this point home. It says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, not after we got it all together. Okay? All right, assertive behavior means making choices about how we use our time. And this is a big one. People ask you to do stuff all the time, don't they? Lead singing for this ladies' thing, please. Would you do that? And organize this and get the food ready. Would you mind running, I don't know, the PowerPoint at church? And can you watch my dog? There's always people asking you to do stuff. And a lot of it's stuff that needs doing. And a lot of it is stuff that you're capable of doing. But just because you're asked to do something doesn't obligate you to do it. It just means that person thought maybe you could and would. Okay? And I'm not suggesting that you use that as an excuse never to accept and do anything. Okay? We're not going to think in black and white terms. But you can't do everything everyone asks you to do. And we're supposed to be good stewards of our resources. One of those is our time. And you are the expert in how to balance your time, how to use it wisely. Even if it means saying no to a dear friend, or even if it means saying no to a request that's really a valid, good request. Think about Jesus again. How often did he go away from the crowd? There were probably still people who needed healing, who wanted to touch his garment, who had a question. And he was like, no, I've got to go away and be with my Father and regroup. His public ministry probably never would have had a break if he didn't take one. But he did. And he did it kindly, but he had to be assertive to do that. With assertive behavior, you can respect your own needs and the needs of the person who's asking you. We're going to get to that tomorrow. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to bring up about when you're assertive and you know how to say no to some things, you can enthusiastically say yes to things you do want to do. And I really like the sign that's on our ladies' restroom. You guys have probably seen it or have one here where it says, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. So God may put something in front of you to do that you don't feel real comfortable doing. But if you take it with an attitude of assertiveness, you'll step out. You've got to step out of the boat before God will reward you for that. You've got to trust him and try. Moving on to the next point. Assertive behavior means making choices about friendships. Have you ever had a situation with a friend where something needed to change? An example. Let's say you have a friend who calls you all the time, day and night. Dear friend, sweet person, good person. They call you all the time, always needing something. They need your time, they need your advice, they need your stuff, but it's too much. Now, assertive behavior, speaking the truth in love, would have you respectfully address that with that person rather than just going, I'm not answering the phone, or whatever. That's what we do. We don't answer the phone, and we say, I didn't get your text. Yeah, you did. But talk to them. Again, that's not being truthful. Speak the truth in love. And it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It would be an uncomfortable discussion. It would. But most likely, it would honor you and your friend to have that. And you'd end up better for it. It's just scary. All right, so, talked about assertiveness. It sounds pretty good. But is there really a benefit in being that way? Because if there's no benefit in being assertive, I'll just keep on being either aggressive or passive. It's what I'm used to. Let's look at some benefits. You can boil down the benefits to the fact that assertive behavior helps you get along with others, yourself, and God better. And that's kind of everybody. So, yes. Getting along better with others. An assertive relationship, again, is where each person relates to the other with respect, honesty, and genuineness. Nobody's pretending to be something they're not. You give up your agendas, you give up your little white lies, you give up manipulative behaviors and attempts to control the other person. If you do that, you're going to get along pretty well with other people. Also, you get along better with yourself, which sounds kind of odd unless you're one of these people who talks to yourself, and there's really two of you but one. But anyway, but there's times when I don't get along with me very well, especially if I'm struggling with a sin. I'm like, am I going to do that thing or am I not? Why did I do that? Oh, I don't get along with me very well sometimes. I regret what I say or don't say, what I do or don't do. People who don't assert themselves, who either behave passively or aggressively, usually have a lot of anger toward themselves as well as towards others. We don't always think about that, but it's true. You're frustrated a lot if you're not acting assertively. So if you take care of that, speak the truth in love, you're going to like yourself a lot better because you're being genuine. Assertive behavior works to increase your self-esteem and self-confidence. If you practice focusing on truth and assertive speaking, you'll gain confidence. At first, it's going to feel awkward, and you're going to think, I screwed that up. But the more you do it with time, the more self-confidence you gain, which in turn leads you to be more assertive, and then you're on a good forward roll. Assertiveness contributes to physical well-being. If you're anxious and worried and stressed all the time, you probably have a lot of headaches, stomach aches, you get sick a lot, you get autoimmune diseases. Physically, you're affected by your emotions as well. And if you start being assertive and more self-confident, you will reap physical benefits as well. Assertive behavior assists with problem solving, because you can focus on the problem and not what Joe thinks of you talking about the problem, or whether you should bring this up, or there's just a lot less to keep up with, and you can focus on the problem itself and not everybody. Assertiveness helps you get along better with God. And that may sound odd too, because how in the world could that help you with God? But if you remember, that's a relationship as well, isn't it? Now, we know God knows everything. He doesn't need you to talk truthfully with him, because he knows the truth before you even think of it. But like any parent, God wants us to talk to him truthfully. And if you're speaking the truth in love, that applies to God as well. He doesn't, like I said, he doesn't need you to do that, but that's what he wants. And you will feel closer to God if you're being truthful with him. If you say, God, this is how I feel, and this is where I'm struggling. And on the flip side, if you listen for God's response, if you take time to consider what he's telling you through these other people who are trying to reach you, you have a more genuine relationship with God as well. Assertiveness is a lot about self-control. We'll hit some of those verses tomorrow, but self-control is not just about getting yourself to not do something. It's like, oh, I need to not eat that cake. That's self-control. But self-control is also about getting yourself to do something. Speak up. Be assertive. I'm going to have self-control, and I'm not going to just sit here. I'm going to do something. Assertiveness frees you up to do God's will, too. I think we'll all agree that it's uncomfortable when somebody's not pleased with us. We want people to like us. I want you guys to like me. I want you to approve of what I say this weekend. But I also have to remember that this isn't about me. And when we're addressing people assertively, it's kind of not about us as well. So we have to get out of the habit of being afraid to speak because of what we think someone might feel about it. And again, don't go all black and white on me and you're thinking and say, well, then I'm just not going to care what anybody says. I'm just going to be totally honest. No, not at all. Speaking the truth in love. Don't forget the love piece. Listen to look at King Saul. What excuse did he give God when God gave his specific instructions to completely destroy the Amalekites, and Saul didn't do that? He gave an excuse in 1 Samuel 15:24. And he said, oh, I was afraid of the people, so I gave in to them. This is not a new thing. Fear has been around forever, and it keeps us from being authentic. Assertiveness frees you to tell the truth. It's easy to tell others little white lies just so we can get along better and not have them be mad at us. You can say, sure, I'd be glad to watch your dog while you go on vacation for a month, even though your 5 cats hate dogs. That's not honest, not authentic. Just remember that lying has never been acceptable to God. There are better and more authentic ways to get your point across. Jesus is the truth in flesh, and being joined with Christ means that you're not only to tell the truth, you are to live a truthful life. Let's listen to Ephesians 4:15. We're not going to read it, but there's a word in there that says speaking the truth in love that we've read before. And that the word about speaking the truth is actually a verb and could be translated truth-ing. It's something you do, not something that is. You're to behave in such a manner that Jesus, the truth, is evident in everything you do. Speaking the truth is only one part of living the truth. And this doesn't mean that you have to be cruelly honest. Again, don't go to that extreme. You don't need to say, yeah, those jeans make your rear look like a Mack truck. Okay? That may be truthful, right? But it's not loving. So what do? You can say, well, because you don't want to say, oh, those look fantastic when they don't, because then that's not good. So you say something like, well, I like the style of jean that you're wearing, but the ones you wore yesterday, those are way more flattering on you. Okay? Now, hopefully they won't push you and say, well, yeah, but what do you think about these? Anyway, hopefully they won't go there, but try to be truthful. Assertiveness frees you to cooperate with God in developing self-control. In Galatians 5:23, it tells us that self-control is one of the fruits of the Spirit. It's evidence that the Holy Spirit lives inside of you. And when you learn to behave assertively, you're learning to exercise self-control so that you don't become overly aggressive, or underly assertive, which is passive. Assertive behavior is that middle ground. And the power to have self-control, well, that comes from God, not from you. It's way too hard, and it goes against every bit of our human nature to try to be assertive without God to help. Because sometimes I have to tell you, and you're probably not that different from me, my human nature just wants to slap somebody upside of the head until they see it my way, because my way's right? Yeah. And other times, you know, I'm pretty unpredictable. Other times, I'm just done with it. I just say, whatever. That's the thing now. If you want to just kind of say, yeah, what? You just say, whatever, and that means, That's not good either, okay? Neither of those behaviors is assertive. Neither is speaking the truth in love. And with God's grace and His strength and His wisdom, we learn how to be assertive. Now, tomorrow morning, we're just about done for tonight, but tomorrow morning, we're going to take a look at what the Bible says about assertiveness. We'll look at some scriptures that look like they contradict each other about what we should do as far as being assertive and self-confident and stuff like that. And in the afternoon, we'll go over some how-to tips. How do you be assertive? We know what it is. We know what the Bible says, but how do you do it? And before we start this evening, I'd really like to read the lyrics of a song by one of my favorite Christian groups called Casting Crowns. And I don't know if you guys listen to them or not, but learning to be assertive, to feel confident in who we are, can be really intimidating. And they've got this song called The Voice of Truth. We talked about how emotion and sin and all these other things can cloud your thinking and keep you from seeing truth. And this song just speaks to me because sometimes I have trouble seeing the truth through all these other messages. So listen as we close. I would sing, but my mouth makes me sound funny right now. So I'm going to read it, okay? So here it is, Voice of Truth by Casting Crowns. Oh, what I would do to have the kind of truth it takes to climb out of this boat I'm in, over these crashing waves, to step out of my comfort zone to the realm of the unknown where Jesus is, and He's holding out His hand. But the waves, they're calling out my name and they laugh at me. They remind me of all the times I've tried before and failed. The waves, they keep on telling me time and time again, girl, you'll never win. You'll never win. But the voice of truth tells me a different story. The voice of truth says, do not be afraid. And the voice of truth says, this is for my glory. Out of all the voices calling out to me, I'm going to choose to listen and believe the voice of truth. Oh, what I would do to have the kind of strength it takes to stand before a giant with just a sling and a stone, surrounded by the sound of 1,000 warriors shaking in their armor, wishing they had the strength to stand. But the giant's calling out my name and he laughs at me. He's reminded me of all the times I've tried before and failed. The giant keeps on telling me time and time again, girl, you'll never win. You will never win. But the stone was just the right size to put the giant on the ground. And the waves, they don't seem so high from the top looking down. I will soar with the wings of eagles. And when I stop and listen to the sound of Jesus singing over me, I will choose to listen and believe the voice of truth. So thank you for your attention. I know it is late and you're tired, but I appreciate your attention tonight. We'll see you tomorrow.